Hello and welcome back to Rally DNA for episode 10 of season 3. This week, with the exciting prospect of the new EA Sports WRC game right around the corner, leaving my credit card twitching at the need to purchase a next-gen console imminently, we are going to look back over some rallying games of times past, as well as look forward to the new game, which is now just a matter of weeks away, and discuss what we know so far and what we would like to see from it. Joining me, Killian Cronin, is as ever my eloquent, passionate, and encyclopedic co-host and good friend, Jamie Arkle, along with a guest who is far more ensconced in the sim racing world than us poor two sads, Mr. Thomas Harrison Lord, editor-in-chief of sim racing website Traction.gg, who also have an accompanying podcast of their own. Thomas is a big rally fan himself and a contributor to Autosport magazine and motorsport.com. Thomas, welcome on the show and thank you very much for coming on board.
Thank you very much. And that introduction lives up to the Rally DNA heritage of lots of complicated words and expressions. But what an intro. Wow, can't live up to that. Apologies. I'm going to bring this podcast down a level. But anyway, we're here to talk about rally games.
Absolutely, and not in the slightest. If anything, you surely elevate us to the next level that we'll have to maintain now over the next few episodes.
You got ensconced. You got ensconced in there. That was a good leader.
Well, Jamie, this is good. It's all you're doing, Jamie. This is you put pressure on me to start banging in.
Podcast.
Yeah. We're going to release an accompanying thesaurus sometime in the near future. So, Thomas, just I suppose before we get started, maybe to introduce yourself to our listeners, give us a bit about your background and what you do, and perhaps your personal connection to rallying and what makes it special for you.
Certainly, thank you. Well, apologies to most listeners who might scoff at the thought of video games being remotely relevant, but I think it's key because my personal interest in the WRC as my favourite sport came from playing a video game, first of all, which was Colin McRae Rally. So I also grew up watching Tony Mason, which helps. But mainly the video game really engaged with me and resonated with me. And wow, who's this Colin McRae fellow? I should look into more stuff. And obviously, when you're young, you don't necessarily have the disposable income to buy Rally Access magazine or your own VHS recorder to record Grandstand or whatever it might be, right? So that was a really key thing, and what I really hope with a new WRC game is that it also lights a passion for a younger generation to keep the sport sustainable. So that's my pitch, so to speak, to the ardent rally fans who are normally listening for, I don't know, a recollection of the 1992 Swedish. But this is key because I think for the future of the sport and to build up this passion, that's video games. And for me, I obviously write about video games on a daily basis, but I only write about racing, like bike or car games. And I do that because that's my outlet of talking about my passion, which is motorsport and cars. And one of those is the WRC. Because there are a plethora of racing games out there, some of them with licensed content. You know, I was playing the Crew Motorfest all week, which is nothing to do with rally, really. But within there, it's an open world fictional game on Hawaii. But the 2017 Citroen C3 WRC is in that game. It's very random. But, someone might see that and go, oh, what's this cool car? And they might research it. And that might be an 8-year-old who gets into Chris Meek crash videos. So it's key. But yeah, I've just quickly, I'm in a bit of a ramble there. But you can tell I'm interested in the topic, I suppose. But I just wrote a very brief 650 words in the back page of Autosport, or penultimate page, about how games are so important for the future of the World Rally Championship and rallying in general. I mean, especially look at lockdown. I didn't mention that, where so many people got in Dirt Rally 2 clubs. I think the British Rally Championship did run a season that counted in dirt or something that was quite serious. So, yes, I love the sport. I love writing. That's my job. So happy days.
Right, man, that's spot on. Like, couldn't agree more. Like it's video games. The importance, I think, is undersold far too often in terms of the power to introduce a new generation of fans. And I'm sure we're going to, trace our own origins in video digital games from this.
And also, just to be clear, as a grown adult, well, some might dispute that fact, but I know. Even though most people listening, some people listening might have done rally driving or co-driving, but most people probably haven't. And I know that my advancing years and lack of budget I can't do it myself, but I can afford a steering wheel and pedals and get maybe 5% of the way there. I'm not saying it's super realistic like some people seem to claim. I know there's a big gap, but at least I'm listening to a co-driver and reacting and rolling, but not getting hurt or damaging my bank balance. So there's also an element for respectable adults to, there's a bit of fever there.
For sure. And I think, look, you struck on a very relevant point early on, I think certainly it's one of the notes I have for Colin McRae Rally, which we'll certainly get to later on. It's, you can definitely trace a line for, these things inspiring a new generation. That is very important. I think if you asked many people stage side today, if you went to start a survey on a ditch somewhere at a certain rally in a certain part of the world, I'm sure if you went down through a couple of hundred spectators and asked them what really got them into the sport, and I'd say not a small amount of them would have a similar answer to you. So yeah. It's very relevant and it remains so. And I suppose the promoter, which is I suppose another story, isn't always necessarily doing the best job for the health of the sport. But with something like hopefully with the new game, particularly given how big the Formula One games have gotten of late, and the advancing interest in Formula One, then maybe we get something on even a little bit of the scale of that into rallying from the new game.
Exactly.
It would be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, that's the big hope. It's Electronic Arts, EA Sports. They're kind of a controversial company in some respects, known for perhaps a bit too many microtransactions. But you look at how many copies of the Formula One games, but not just that, the Madden American football games or the formerly FIFA football games, but now EA Sports FC this year. That's a controversial topic for another time. But they put a huge amount of marketing and PR and social media influencer campaigns behind these games. And if one of those happens to be a World Rally Championship game, then that's massive for the sport, in my opinion. If it's good, but we'll find out later this year.
Fingers and toes firmly crossed. Now, rally games have been in the mainstream for over 30 years at this point. Some good, some bad, and some coming close to being great and sometimes falling at the final hurdle. So today we're going to take a look at a number of titles across the decades. We're not going to rank them, and not all of which are necessarily great either. So I guess logically what we should do is start way back in the late 1980s with the officially licensed Lombard RAC rally game. Released in 1988, Lombard RAC Rally was a licensed game available on PC and Atari, and I guess is the OG rallying title. If you want to revisit it today without having the original floppy disk it came on, like I did the other night, you can find it on the web archive and play it in your browser in all its 8-bit glory.
It's a fantastically detailed approximation of a Sierra three-door Cosy interior, isn't it? So I recognize that wheel,
It's hard to miss out on what is very definitively a Sierra's dash as well. It's a you cannot really be confused at much else. And I appreciate the level of detail they put into it. Although graphically, obviously not impressive by today's standards, but the level of detail they put into what they had, I think still looks rather good and worthy of praise today.
Little details. I mean, I think the thing that really struck me, I mean, I remember I bought this game at a car boot sale in like the late 80s and didn't have the ability to play it. I think it was the Atari version. I bought it expressly for the cover of the Jimmy McRae Sierra. It might still be at my mum's house back home somewhere. But it seems fairly redolent of like the sort of almost the sort of cottage industry of video game development at the time. The idea that quite a niche sport in the grand scheme of things. Certainly one based on a specific rally could have a dedicated video game. That certainly wouldn't happen now, and I can't imagine it would have happened at any other time in video game history.
And the story of how it came about is kind of interesting. And of course, it has as games tended to have back then, a much smaller development team as what we may be used to. If you look at the credits of modern games, there was less than 10 people involved in the whole project. But it supposedly came about from someone watching someone showed them some onboard footage from the rally. They said, yeah, we should make a game about this. And that's exactly how they portrayed the view the player has. It's like the roll cage mounted onboard camera. So you're looking out, you can see the kind of shoulders of both the driver and the co-driver. You're looking bang on down the center of the car over the transmission tunnel. You can even see the driver changing gear as you go. You can even modify the car in the menus as well after earning in-game cash down to buying a new pair of Sibbies for the front of it, which I think was a lovely touch for 1988. And it would go on to spawn a number of successors, which we shall also cover. So what do you guys think? I know all three of us are not old enough in the slightest to remember this game coming out. And as I said, I've only seen it on an emulator, and I certainly do not have an Atari or a PC capable of taking a floppy disk. So although I imagine finding real copies must be rather difficult at this point.
It's a game actually that I will be upfront and say, of all the games we're going to discuss, it's probably the one I've not played. But now you've let me know that it's available through a browser after we recorded. I'll certainly be checking it out.
I'll send you the link straight after this. I'll pop
Please do.
it into the Zoom chat. One thing I did notice in my Swift playthrough the other night, it also features like a TV interview section, which is basically trivia.
Win
it's
money,
a quiz.
repair your car.
Yeah. A really cool amount of features for, as an opening foray into rallying games, for the first one. I mean, it came out punching,
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many. There's a lot of the TV interview names. I know Mickey Biazian seems to feature quite a lot, understandably, because it's 1988. It'd have been hot property at the time, and you can guarantee Mickey Biazian probably wasn't consulted at any time in the development of this game. Probably the first time he was aware of it was when his name cropped up.
That's why they didn't have to call him Mickey Bison, like on that unlicensed game we were talking about before recording. So, and I suppose, yeah, a pretty strong start. I don't know what else there is to say about that one. We don't have the strength of experience of it to move forward, but we have to use that as a natural starting point for the genesis of all that followed.
It's quite fitting that Jimmy McRae should have a small bit part in the origin of video game, rally video games, I think, given what follows.
I didn't even consider that, actually. A very, very good point, Jamie. Yeah. Which would bring us, I suppose, neatly to one of its successors, of which there were many by the same developer. One that you two do have experience of, and I do not, which would be Network Q Rally. Although, which one?
Well, the 96 one for me, but there was one in 93 as well. And I don't know which ones you've played, Jamie. But it was
96 for me. Briefly 93, but 96 is the one that I have, memories of.
Yeah, I can still remember the introduction music now. And in particular, because this was the first video game I ever played. And while Colin McRae Rally was really what lit the fire and the interest in rally in general, this was the first one that got me into gaming. But my experience was relatively limited because it was on the family PC, which was designed to do word processing and maybe a bit of Photoshop. So it could only be used once a month or something crazy in the loft. And also, it had a game-breaking glitch. I think our PC wasn't really designed for gaming. So if you didn't skip the cutscene at the start, it would just continue on a loop, and then you had to reboot the PC. Fantastic. But
I did that too.
Yes. Okay, so maybe that was every copy. But of course, any game with Tony Mason doing a voiceover is a win.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, it's sort of... I love the fact that because of the limited graphic capability of PCs at the time, the intros are all blocky videos from probably Top Gear Rally reports, as you say. Escort WRC's launching Escort Cosworth's launching and stuff like that. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, and there was the Maxi Megane, which is always a favorite car. I think I could be wrong here, but instead of the Mitsubishi, it had the Evo either 1 to 3. But it had the Proton livery.
Proton Wyra.
Yeah, the Proton Wyra. But it had a cockpit camera, which looked like it was just basically a still image of a superimposed within a game.
Yes, I've seen that. I was watching some videos on YouTube in the run-up to this and seen this. It's sort of like an animated photograph, for want of a better word.
And there's a game later on we'll touch upon, which hopefully which does something very similar. But my defining memories were trying to play with a joystick as well, which was clearly designed for flight, but that's all we had, or the keyboard. And my brother would play it, who's 5 years younger than me, so he must be very young. He would just pull up to the grass and have a picnic. He enjoyed doing that. in this.
I mean, but sorry, go on.
No, final point. But within that sort of youthful exuberance and having jokes about picnics, I still was filled with dread when you had to do the Pundershaw stage. I think it was actually nearly 60 kilometers in the game, and maybe took about half an hour well, with my driving, maybe you could do it quicker. I just rewatched it, someone play it on YouTube recently, and that must have been extremely advanced for the time to have a stage that long, because as we'll touch upon in some more modern games, even they don't necessarily have ones that are as lengthy or as challenging. And I think it had some stages at nighttime as well, so very ahead of its time in some ways, even though now it looks very primitive.
Yeah, bold,
Absolutely.
bold. They really struck high for that one, or reached high on that one, actually, to include the night stages and the long. Yeah, I mean that long stage alone must have taken up quite a lot of the
Oh yeah,
processing power of what was available hardware wise.
For me, it's hard not to associate this with the one that followed, which was, I'm pretty sure, basically the same International Rally Championship. Certainly, it was another Magnetic Fields Microprose creation. And yeah, I think it obviously expanded upon just the network queue elements. You had a load of weird rallies like Russia, Indonesia, Egypt, and a few
Whoa.
others. Yeah. That had Proton Wire, Felicia kit car, Ren McGann kit car, Impreza 555. I think it had Nebo 4 as well, and a Repsol Escort Cosworth. A really bizarre collection of cars, very of its time. And so yeah, some of those long stages. Again, it wasn't a rally game per se. Certainly, International Rally Championship was, because you were often racing against other cars squabbling over the same bit of the stage, which I think is it says a lot about how far rally games have come, or perhaps the public consciousness and understanding of rallying. Because I think back in the day, there was probably some reticence of game developers to sort of depict rallying as it is, against a stopwatch, as opposed to squabbling like a race car game, against other cars on the same bit of stage.
I agree. I mean, the whole notion of a co-driver seems rather straightforward to us and the people listening to this podcast, but to the general gaming audience, I think it's quite an alien concept. And actually, the gaming website I write for, Traction, one of its most popular YouTube videos is explaining what a co-driver is in video games, obviously, but people watch it just generally to understand, oh, what's this second person doing, shouting these numbers and strange words about, and actually it does really well. Every month there's 10,000 people watch it, something crazy. So you're right, International Rally Championship changed it up a bit. It was almost not rally cross, but there was other cars, AI controlled vehicles on the circuit, but it used the same developer as the Network Q games, same graphics engines as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. And I think this is correct. The PlayStation 1 port, and only in the UK, was called Tommy Mäkinen Rally. So maybe on PC and in other markets it was called International Rally Championship. But the same game is Tommy Mäkinen Rally, which I have a copy of here.
He's holding it up as well. Look at that.
I've got it here. Yeah. There we go.
You say look at that, Jamie, but this is an audio medium.
I know.
I'll describe the Evo 4, the pixelated Evo 4.
If you send us a photograph of that later on, we'll put it on Twitter when we launch the episode.
I will do.
Maybe.
It's got a little Tommy Mäkinen picture of his head with world champion and a crest.
There he is.
Looking very Dougal Maguire.
Ardal O'Hanlon himself.
Yeah. I don't know if this is different to the version that you played, Jamie, but on the front as well, it boasts about 130 tracks, and it had all the strange locations, but it also had a track editor where you could create your own circuit, which is mind-blowing now, never mind back then. But I really struggled with this game, and I think it's perhaps notable that this released the same year as Colin McRae Rally, and one went on to be a successful franchise, and one certainly didn't.
Yes.
But the other thing is there's a challenge Tommy mode within it. And it's just 1v1 against the hardest difficulty. It's basically impossible. I cannot complete them. But there's Tommy Mäkinen voice lines in a typically phlegmatic style over the top. And you can barely hear him for the music. But it's like, oh, you think you can beat me? That's basically what it says.
And he's recorded it from his house on the phone.
On a Sony Ericsson.
Yeah, when of course, like, you'd wonder that, as Jamie obviously had this International Rally Championship, and as you point out, it came out the same year. Was this a reaction to the initial success of Colin McRae on PlayStation, and did they scramble to retitle it and port it to PS1 with the Tommy Mäkinen name as a sort of response?
I'm just looking at the release dates, and they both came out in July. So I'm wondering maybe if the PR campaign for Colin McRae Rally was further along the line, and then there was a reactionary thing there. But Can you imagine July 1998 as a PlayStation 1 owner? You could buy Tommy Mackinnon Rally or Colin McRae Rally. And I went with Colin McRae. Yes, choose wisely.
Well, I remember International Rally that I played on the family PC made no mention of Tommy Mackinnon. You know, apart from you could scroll through and see drivers. So it must have been a definite sort of attempt to, probably in reaction to the ballooning success of Colin. And another thing I remember, because I was like 10 and I don't know, had a limited patience, I couldn't, when I first started playing it, you'd run out of fuel on the long stages and you had to pull over to a lay-by with like yellow arrows and then pull back, press down on the keypad to refuel your car. And there was no, there probably was somewhere, but I couldn't find out. All I knew is that for a long time when I was playing it, I could only do the short stages because I'd run out of fuel and couldn't work out how to refuel my car. You know, I'd be having a complete stooshy at the inability to finish stages. You know?
I can't recall that feature at all, but maybe I never did the long stages.
Yeah.
Maybe they removed it on the PS1 version.
Yes, maybe the PS1s couldn't handle it, the longer stages.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'd like to think that, you know, Colin was shooting his mouth off in the service park of the Tour de Corse, saying how much money he was getting for sticking his name on the front of a PlayStation game, and Tommy is listening in the background, getting his PR people to get straight onto microphones and magnetic fields.
There should be an option where you can slide wide of some oil left by a helmet imp or something. And, that should be.
It's got an interesting strapline in the back. Only the best is good enough for top people. So it's no surprise that Tommy Mackinnon Rally has been endorsed by the double world champion.
Double,
yeah.
Sorry, was that only the best is the best? For, sorry, what was that?
Only the best is good enough for top people.
What a weird, nebulous, nothing phrase, you know. Like...
That is highly unusual.
blue sky thinking, or something from a boardroom, you know.
And you're right about weird venues. I'd forgotten. It says 130 tracks from over 15 countries, from Alaska to Australia.
Yeah.
Alaska, famously not a country as well.
Oh, yes.
I think Brazil was in International Rally Championship as well. But, yeah.
Probably the same here then.
They were really trying hard to harmonize it. We've thought of the name and we need people to make sure that this is international. So we'll go really obscure corners of the world as far apart from each other as we can possibly get. None of which...
Ulaanbaatar rally.
Yeah, not necessarily have a rally, but we'll put one there. And I guess as we're on the subject of International Rally Championship and the series created by Magnetic Fields, we should probably move on to the successor to that one, which I believe would be Mobile One Rally Championship, or depending on if you had a PlayStation or not, Rally Championship.
Just Rally Championship, yes.
I seem to recall picking this up. I think I definitely I feel like I picked this up in like a budget bin or something in about circa 2003, 2002. Definitely a few years after it had come out.
Did it have a sold-out software logo? Remember the discount silver branding you'd get?
Yes, it was definitely a silver case or something. But of course, you know, my eyes were immediately drawn to the red, the real bright crimson artwork with the Ibiza kit car with full lamp pod spec on the front, which suckered me right in, and it was probably like a tenner or something. And I brought it home and I got many hours on PC of being quite terrible with it. I thought it looked like the best thing I'd ever seen in 20 years ago, obviously now. And again, looking at some footage from it the other day, I think it looks reasonably good for its time. And had a fair amount of work and detail put into it. Nice car list as well. Something slightly different by that point. And obviously Rally Games had really started to kind of gather pace. And of course we were post Colin McRae Rally at this point. Either of you guys have that one too?
This is a shout for me for perhaps, in fact, no, not even perhaps. It's the best video game, rally game artwork ever sold, I think. That front cover, I won that in a poster. It's incredible. I genuinely... And I have strong memories of Colin McRae Rally 2, which looked classier. But that box is everything, you know.
Yeah, this one passed me by till later in life, which is a shame, really, because I missed out clearly. But it's just mad. So even on the PlayStation, it was just called Rally Championship, not Mobile One But this effectively is an official game of the British Rally Championship, which will never happen again, and don't think it happened before. I mean, we're in the era here as well, when the British Touring Car Championship had a couple of games back to back as well, didn't it? And
Yeah, good point,
like
actually. Yeah.
Our championships sort of led the way in terms of video game development, and they were both things were made by different studios, but they were both British development studios as well. Also, I don't know whether they sold well outside of this small island though.
Well, Toka did, didn't it? The touring car one.
Toka did. Yeah, that's still got a lot of following on the internet to this day. This less so, but from memory, it had again sort of like Network QRC Rally, where it had Pundershaw. I think this had some very long stages in it and the visuals were a huge step forward, and it had nighttime stages as well. And was the Octavia F2 car in this?
It was. It was the Almira kit car.
Yeah, I have the car list open in front of me, complete with pictures.
But before you get there, like on the stages, like you say, Pundershaw was genuinely brutal. You needed some plasters on your fingers for calluses, and woe betide you if you knocked the front lamp pod off a few K into it in the dark.
That's right.
Genuinely nails. And of course, the slightly weird roly-poly physics, which I must admit frustrated me, because you'd hit a road imperfection in the road, which could occasionally almost flip your car, seemingly unwarranted.
A Dirt Rally 1 problem at times. Remember, if you recall.
Yeah.
I think, and it's a great point you make. I think again we've passed out Colin McRae Rally for the time being. We'll come back to it. Given the data come out now, I think playing Mobile One Rally Championship, I didn't get the sense of jeopardy, fear, and dread like I got with this game until Dirt Rally came out, where there's almost an element of fear and horror, as you say, you take out a light or whatever. I didn't get that for almost, well, I guess 15 years later, maybe when I played Dirt Rally. That experience didn't happen in between for me. I think that was the one that really introduced me to that element of it.
Yeah, hit us up with that car list as well, because it's
all right.
Just before
into my veins. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry to interrupt again. Just before, am I correct in thinking? But I might be misremembering that you had to drive front-wheel drive cars to unlock the WRC spec cars. Was that
correct? Right? Yeah.
I don't think I ever made the WRC cars, to be honest. Well, I was driving an Almira, and that's a win.
I don't think I ever got to them either.
A 99 spec 206 WRC with the best livery as well, if I remember right.
Oh, the white and blue.
Now, being that this is 2023, there is some stuff added to this list that was not in the original game, which appeared to have been custom made and mods, but they are highlighted as such, because one of them is very obviously not a real car because it's a skip in this list, and it says Wanker's Bakery on it.
Brilliant.
Playable vehicles, however: Saxo kit car, great start. 1996 Escort kit car, 1997 Ford Escort Maxi, Ford Puma kit car, the 97 Honda Civic, Hyundai Coupe kit car, some custom made. Someone made a mod with the Puma, with a 4-wheel drive Puma, Evo 4, Evo 5, Almira kit car, Micra kit car, which I really, really like, 106 Maxi, 206 WRC in the white and blue, Jamie. Good memory there. 97 Megane, the Proton Wira, again, returning. They popped up, Protons popped up in the WRC games as well.
It must be a licensing workaround, right?
Yeah. Well, no, the Evo's here as well, though. So there's Evo 4 and 5, yeah. Proton Compact, which I guess is a Mitsubishi Colt. Cordoba, another strong one. The Ibiza from the cover, Felicia kit car, Octavia kit car, 98 Impreza WRC, and an Astra kit car, a Golf kit car. Like that's quite
the gravel crew list, isn't it? I mean,
very much so.
Is there another game with the Octavia kit car that's licensed?
I do have one somewhere later on. Doesn't it appear in the
V-Rally?
V-Rally it appears, and I think it's also in what's the Rally Race of Champions one. I think it might appear.
Okay.
But, anyway, this also gets bonus points for having an ordnance service survey map in the head-up display. Really sort of like I enjoyed that a lot.
Because they were very proud of at the time, from looking back at old reviews now, of how I guess this is like, what a developer says, they've laser scanned the track these days to go, well, we've worked in conjunction with Ordnance Survey UK and Ordnance Survey Northern Ireland to recreate the stages in whatever detail. And then slapped an Ordnance Survey map into the HUD, just as part of some sponsorship deal with Ordnance Survey, I guess, which is quite amusing.
Yeah. I love the list of stages. Cockainog, My Heron, Twiggly's, Pondershaw, Tyrone's Ditches. As you said, Thomas, you'd never get this in the modern world. It's just so esoteric. I love it.
As I'm holding the game in my hands and as we're talking about it, I really need to play this again. But the problem is, is it rose-tinted spectacles? Is it going to? It won't live up to the modern day games. I know that. So, but still, but I've noticed one random bizarre factoid that on the disc it's printed, and it's not the publisher or the developer, but it was distributed by Electronic Arts of all people.
Yes, I spotted that on the Wikipedia entry last night, which I thought was rather unusual, and in a roundabout way is another thing bringing us maybe full circle to the present day. But they must have maybe they were just UK distributor, or maybe they're probably the international distributor, because I guess it was a UK developed game, so perhaps that was the international distribution rights.
But no doubt this is one of the all-time greats, and we mentioned it. Every game we mentioned so far we've compared to Colin McRae Rally, but because that is the pin-up. But this is for the Cognoscenti. Rally Championship is where it's at.
They all these early games have strong Tony Mason on a wet Sunday afternoon vibes, don't they? And I mean, and the best possible way. It's very homely,
and he's in the car. If you go through the car list, which I watched again on YouTube, like he does a voiceover explaining the history of each car in the game, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, dine out on that nostalgia, Thomas, because if you play it, you might harm it.
Yeah, okay. I'll just stick to YouTube.
Just watch the Tony Mason bits and feed off of that. So from there, then, what came next from Magnetic Fields?
To the best of my knowledge, that was kind of the last game that they did.
That was where
certainly as the developers, but I could be wrong there.
Okay, sort of I suppose maybe a high point to end, or maybe quite a sad point to I don't know, maybe the light that burned twice as bright burns half as long. And as we've mentioned this dozens of times already, I guess we should go back in time to Colin McRae Rally. But I think before that, there is a very, very important one that did chronologically come before and maybe has just as strong a place in the hearts of people like us. And that would be Sega Rally.
Oh, I still get hot flushes and jiggle 20p pieces in my pocket whenever I occasionally see a cabinet. I'll stop anything I'm doing, no matter how important and busy my day, if I ever see a Sega Rally cabinet to play.
And it'll inevitably have the really wobbly, broken gear shifter hanging off or missing.
Oh, the steering wheel really sticky.
Well. Oh, the sticky steering wheel. Yeah.
Oh, the worst one for me, the seat that wouldn't recline, and I couldn't fit in. And you'd be like, "Oh no, it works, but I actually can't fit inside it."
Yeah, the problem when in your youth that you couldn't reach the pedals and move the seat, and now it's like welded to the steering wheel, so you have to kind of fold yourself in and play with your knees on the pedals.
The rubber gaiter from the handbrake has long since disappeared, and it's now a greasy bit of steel out of alley, just that from burger grease from the previous incumbent.
Thank God hand sanitizer is a lot more readily available now, because just the thought of a Sega Rally cabinet from days gone by just makes me want to sanitize my hands.
How much would you have to be paid to lick the handbrake of a Sega Rally cabinet?
Well, if they paid me in keeping the Sega Rally cabinet, perhaps I might just lower myself to that level.
But it was the reason for going, not the reason for, because when I was younger, I didn't have control over where we went on a weekend. But the highlight of the year was a trip to Whitby and the arcades on the northern coast, where there'd be a Sega Rally 2. Actually, that was the one that was probably the first one I played. And then because I had experienced that one first, going back to the first Sega Rally initially was quite a jarring experience. But I love them both equally now.
Yeah, I think looking back, there's probably, memories from my youth that they may blend together. There may not be. I don't know if I can make the distinction that clearly between the two from my younger days. But certainly today, I think the original is probably more. If you're going to find one, it's probably going to be the original for some reason, in my experience.
No,
maybe that's different here. But released in 1994. Obviously as judging by the conversation we just had, a game that evokes really strong memories in people across generations, and a proper hero game from this list. Not a sim or realistic by any means, and one I guess for most of us was played on the arcade cabinet rather than necessarily at home, right? It was available on Sega Saturn, but that would in itself wouldn't have been a really popular platform, certainly compared to Mega Drive before it. And
yeah, I've only ever played it in an arcade.
yeah, I've never seen. I don't even know if I knew anybody with a Sega Saturn in the 90s, but yeah, no actual stages here. I know we've kind of lambasted this earlier, but a lap-based racing game, checkpoints and other cars on the tracks. The original had just 2 cars to choose from that you could apparently unlock a Stratos. But your choice.
But the weirdness of the cars, right? Like, sorry, I didn't mean to trample on you there, but I can't be the only one who, even at the time, thought, okay, so a now recently retired old hat Delta, and I mean, the ST205 makes its appearance in Australia in 1994. It would have been brand new. I mean, it's such a weird choice of 2 cars.
Well, is it the Japanese developers trying to show how streets ahead that the new Toyota was, perhaps, and show you the comparison between this boxy European hatchback and the sleek coupe lines of an ST205? Is there some element of that, perhaps?
Yeah,
they might have got the exclusive deal with Toyota because Toyota these days is notoriously difficult to work with for licenses to become inside video games. Even though video game companies might pay them money, they are selective. Need for Speed, the current ones don't have Toyota cars, for example, which is a big thing with the Supra as a tunable modding car. I don't know, slight tangent there, but it was one of the few games actually really that has a Toyota on the cover and is featured in Sega Rally.
Well, that also makes sense because, like, in early at McRae rallies, you'd get Celicas. I remember in McRae 2005, there was an ST185, which I think is like, give or take, the only time I've played an ST185 Celica in a rally game. And then, in the years following that, nothing,
Yeah. And at the minute, they've got a really close relationship for Gran Turismo. But going back to the crew game I mentioned, this one is the 3rd game they've released. It's Ubisoft, a huge company, and they're incredibly proud to have their first ever Toyota. Apparently, it took years to get the discussions through. So they're a pernickety company when it comes to gaming recreations.
Interesting one, yeah. And there's been a few of them like that over the years, because if I recall correctly, Porsche for many years were very sticky.
Yes,
I mean, they were in Need for Speed many moons ago, and then they all but disappeared from pretty much everything until relatively recently again, which is why you always had to use roughs in Gran Turismo 2, 3, 4, 5, although we do now have Porsches again.
They had an exclusive license to only appear in games by EA for decades, which then 4 or 5 years ago finished. But I digress. Sega Rally.
Well, just briefly on another digression, can we all pause to stop about how good it was making rally cars in Gran Turismo 2? Stripping back your Toyota Corolla to get the livery on a Corolla WRC, or putting 3 spokes on the Delta S4.
Yes.
So, that's the kind of pervert I am.
And Pikes Peak was in that game as well, which is quite cool.
Yes. It was, and I'll bring up Pikes Peak again later.
Yes.
But it's always one that I come back to, and I dearly miss a proper Pikes Peak stage to this day. But again, maybe jumping too far ahead. You could unlock a Stratos apparently in Sega Rally, but I feel like that is something that was a feature of the console version, I would think, given that there's really no way to progress and unlock the Stratos on the cabinet, right? Not without forfeiting months of your pocket money, no doubt.
Well, I think 2 had a Stratos one of them had a Stratos on the cover. I think the Dreamcast one for number 2, which a friend had a Stratos on the cover from the rear, if I remember rightly.
I think you're right there. Yeah. 2 had. So what cars came in 2? A bit more expanded car list. You could get Subarus in the second one, I believe, as well. Yeah.
The 2-door GC8, is it? Or Escort, WRC, a few others.
I remember the print marketing campaign for 2, which ran in like Rally Sport magazine and everything else, which was just like a sort of couple having a cup of tea on their 3-piece suite with, covered in muck and grime with, kicked back from a rally car. And it's just funny the things you recall.
Surely this is, one of these arcade cabinets that you'd have to have alongside your Dream Garage Fantasy Rally Car selection in your fantasy lottery garage, there has to be a Sega Rally cabinet in the background somewhere, right?
Like an actual Delta, and then next to it, the cabinet.
Sitting between an ST205 and 1993 Repsol liveried Delta.
Well, I've got the Celica, and I feel I'm a long way off the other two. So
You could be, you could be close, probably given the way Integrale prices have given, you're probably a lot closer to the Sega Rally cabinet from now. Spawned more sequels than I had remembered, and I fear that many people's memory of Sega Rally stops at 2. Do you guys have any experience of what came after?
I had the Xbox 360 Sega Rally Revo or Revolution or whatever it was, which was pretty good in a sort of, fire and forget throwaway thing. I had quite a sort of dynamic environments for the time, like, the road would rut up. It was still resolutely arcadey. You'd have, pit specials doing fly pasts over the thing and things like that, and giraffes craning their neck in the safari. But it was quite appealing in its own way.
Yeah, that was the last one I played as well. And I suppose a contemporary equivalent really would be something like, there was a game called Gravel, which is quite underrated, and Dirt 5 had vibes, but it didn't capture the essence of Sega Rally that well. I don't know. I just think it's almost a game where it needs to be stuck in the 90s in some respects, and trying to modernize it with deformable terrain to sort of ruin the appeal. But it's kind of strange, and the developer would be in a tight spot there, trying to bring up to date something which is so stuck to arcade cabinets with their limited abilities. There was also a Sega Rally Online downloadable spin-off based on that Revo game as well, which is still on my PlayStation 3 hard drive, but obviously the servers aren't online anymore, so I can't test it. And I think there was a Sega Rally 3 arcade cabinet developed in tandem, although I've never seen it and never played it.
The lesser spotted Sega Rally 3 cabinet.
Yeah, but it has a Suzuki SX4 in it, apparently, which is always a pleasure to see that kind of game. But I'll just finish on the Sega Rally thing. There is an independent developer who's trying to make something which has the Celica and the Delta in it at the minute in Unreal Engine 5, and it's called Overjump Rally. We have a little article about it on the traction.gg website, but my concern there is it's not licensed in any way, and I wish the developer all the best, but it's not an official Sega project, and I'm pretty sure the car's licenses have not been secured. So you can wishlist it on Steam, but we'll see if it has to change or if it will ever be released in the fullness of time.
And what I'll do is I'll put a link to that article maybe in the description of the show below for anyone who wants to check that out and maybe give this person their support before Sega and Toyota and Stellantis Group shut them down for good. So yeah, best of luck to them. Now, I suppose that will bring us now neatly to the game that everyone listening has probably been waiting for us to get to.
There's been a lot of foreshadowing.
42 minutes in. And that would be Colin McRae Rally. And I guess, the game that started it all for a lot of people in terms of their relationship with sport, which is a very important point. Released in 1998 on PS1 and PC, and then later on Game Boy, holding the same name, but obviously that was Game Boy Color, so not the same game in the slightest. The start of a legacy that continues today via the Dirt series, and I guess now you could trace that into the upcoming EA Sports Rally. Introduced a whole new generation to rallying. There's no doubt about that point. Probably responsible for creating a whole new load of fans, and I don't think we can underestimate its impact, can we?
No, this, like I said in the intro, this is really where my fandom began, and just comparing it to Rally Championship or Mobile One Rally Championship game, where we were talking there about if you broke your lights and it had nighttime rallying and stuff. Oh, this had nighttime stage as well, but This I felt was more accessible. The stages were wider. There was less consequence for your accidents. So in the modern age, people would poo-poo that or use the term simcade, which I don't use because it's a not very nice portmanteau and it's used in a derogatory sense. But here, that it was still authentic to a degree. You still had the co-driver pace nuts. There was still damage of sorts. And so, yes, you could unlock a jelly model version of your car or be sucked up by a UFO through cheats and little Easter eggs. but it still taught a whole generation of what rally is and how it works in a general sense. And that's why, for me, I will always hold this up there as one of my favorite all-time video games. And the fable goes that people in America thought Colin McRae was a fictional character like Lara Croft, but he's a real person.
You couldn't agree more. I think it would be impossible for a game to have as much or the same kind of impact that McRae Rally did now in a sort of in a pre-internet world. It's kind of like Gran Turismo introducing a whole generation of people to weird Japanese JDM specials.
Which is why Skylines are so expensive these days.
Yeah, the generation grew up and that's it. And I think that there's a bit of that in McRae Rally. It's in a pre-internet world. It's well, as you've said, it's a lot of people's introduction and passport to the world of rallying, and so many nice details as well. I used to make it a point of pride never to repair the exterior of my car, even if I could, even if I had time. So you'd finish with a hanging Impreza with perhaps mechanically pristine, but yeah, what a game.
It'd be interesting, I wonder, to see any sort of change in the profits of Subaru of Europe in the same year that this game came out. Obviously, they were selling quite a few Imprezas off the back of McRae's exploits already, but I wonder, did they take another step with this game? But that's perhaps beside the point. The fully licensed game, it had correct liveries, drivers, the voice of Nicky Grist, and the man himself who cameoed as an instructor your instructor in a kind of sort of tutorial mode.
In a Felicia.
Which is really strange, given that the tutorial took place. I guess it wouldn't make sense to have the tutorial in the car he was driving at the time, and then the Vivio that he took to Safari in 1993.
That would have been great.
Yeah, perhaps before he went to Safari in it, I guess, because it didn't really work that well once he got there. But yeah, what a really odd choice the Felicia was, but I guess that was the entry level car in that game. The Felicia popped up in a few other games as well, actually, but yeah, I wonder how much McRae got for having his name on the game.
I suppose it's quite pioneering, so it might not have been as much as we think, but certainly for the sequels, it would have been lucrative, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, the second
once they
one
realised it sold lots.
Yeah.
The second one kind of ties in so neatly with the jump to Ford and that fabled £1 million contract that he got, isn't it? And yeah, I mean, I played 1 to death, but weirdly, I think it's 2 is the one that perhaps I have strongest nostalgic feelings for.
Is it the Cordoba?
That's a part of it. It's also the soundtrack, which is just and the classy menus. That sort of like teal, like revolving script thing, and a lo-fi drum and bass soundtrack for the menus. I just absolutely love it. It's still on my Spotify now.
A lot of modern games could learn a lot from that menu.
Yeah, absolutely. Really stripped back, really neat. Well done.
It had a font as well that was quite unique, didn't it? Which reminded me of, I think Ford used a similar font in their advertisements at the time, which all tied together. And I love the use of, I suppose you might call it a pipe on a keyboard, like the vertical line, which was used all through the menus and on the cover as well. And that it does just the whole aesthetic fit, didn't it? It had a really nice, well thought through theme, and the music matched the menus, which matched the font, which matched the adverts. It was really clean and quite a different look to the first game. Which
very different, because the first game looks rather like the cover. Could be easily mistaken for the cover of Network Q Rally 1996. Yeah. There's the same 555 Impreza, the white background, name of the game. That was it. Yeah. Whereas the second one, whoever did the graphic design and came up with the aesthetic, I hope they got a good bonus, because that's probably a lot of the reason why it's stuck in people's memory as well. A unique look, when it worked perfectly as well, and people could learn from, when paired with that amazingly well chosen soundtrack that Jamie's mentioned already. I think that's probably the peak of the Colin McRae Rally series, I would guess.
I remember the cheat code to get all the cars, one careful owner with no spaces. I think it's the first time I ever got a 3-door Sierra. Actually, that's a lie, because of course it featured in Lombard, but certainly the first time I played a 3-door Sierra rally car, Jimmy McRae's old one, the Gemini shell car, which appealed at the time. Metro 6R4s, the like.
I remember pestering. This is one I have a really strong memory of, because I remember pestering my old man to take me to Extravision when it came out, so I could rent it. when that was the thing that you would do. Extravision for the uninitiated outside of Ireland is like very much like an Irish version of Blockbuster. And if you're a fan of old rallying, you'll remember Austin McHale's black Extravision liveried E30 M3. But yeah, I remember pestering him to take me to Extravision. I remember the smell of those old video shops as well. Just one of these things you remember. They all had a distinctive smell. And I rented it. You could rent it for 2 days or whatever because I hadn't had the pocket money to buy it. But and I just spent the weekend smashing cars into trees and just absolutely glued to it. And I think what I have down here is that it's possibly the Terminator 2 of rally games. Basically a perfect sequel after an already great first outing.
Very good. Very good. It also had an arcade mode as well, where you could race, like rallycross, as it were. I remember Corsica being nails. Corsica was really hard, really fucking quick. Whereas Finland, I'd wager the one that everyone thinks is Finland. When you think of Colin McRae Rally 2, I think I can still trace the opening few corners from the opening stage of Finland and Colin McRae Rally 2 from memory.
I could be remembering this wrong, but there might have been a demo that was Finland as well, and that was like it came free with magazines back then. And yeah, that might be. I played the demo first, and then which was Finland, and the Finnish stages were the best. And for me, the British stages were the most difficult. But what I liked about them for the first time is there was asphalt sections of a predominantly gravel rally, which was quite cool because I suppose there were, the Mickey Mouse stages at country hubs. It wasn't like that, but they were on asphalt, right? But it had like dry stone walls and like the giveaway markings on the roads. And it's really cool to drive down what felt like to me as a child, like, oh, it's a public road, but I'm going really quick. But I think this was the one that was ported not too long ago to smartphones. I think, Killian, you mentioned it before we went on air. I just looked it up. 2013, it was they were still using this game as a basis for a mobile version, which just goes to show that the fundamentals were in place.
Yeah, for sure.
But it wasn't called Colin McRae Rally 2, it was just called Colin McRae Rally, just to confuse things. But I believe it's based on, predominantly is this game 2.0.
It also had Australia, which you had like there was a weird, like you could cut through on a railway track and do some spectacular jump. And if you landed it right, you'd nail your time. But 9 times out of 10, you'd crash horrifically.
And in the arcade mode that you mentioned there was a mode or version, it might have been a cheat, where you could press circle and it would shoot fire balls and the competitors would fly in the air. Not realistic in the slightest, but good fun.
That's very Codemasters of a generation of Talker, isn't it? With the tank cheat and everything.
Yes.
Yep.
I think we could wax lyrical about the early Colin McRae series entries for hours, no doubt. But I think we should move on. And with that, a game that I personally have pretty much no experience of, but I know Jamie has very fond recollections, would be V Rally.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I'd be the first to admit that nostalgia is doing quite a lot of heavy lifting with this. I am reading about it when I was thinking about buying or getting my first console in the late 90s, and this was basically touted. I don't know. It must have been V Rally 2 must have been before Colin McRae Rally 2, because I'd obviously played Colin McRae Rally 1. But this was the game that made me decide to get a PS1 over a Nintendo 64, which definitely ages me a little bit. It's another one of these non-real rally games where you share space on the road with other cars. But an incredible car list: Nissan Micra kit car, Astra, all the kit cars, Saxo, as well as yet again the 206 WRC in its best 99 livery, and an Astra kit car as well. Slightly duff physics, as they all did at the time, quite floaty, but it did have a stage editor, create your own stage, which was really quite good. It was you could get quite a lot of definition in there, lots of cool jungle stages, and the graphics were really good for the time. Also, the cover car was this Ari Vatanen's Escort WRC that he used for the one-off in the 1999 Rally Finland. The black with a V Rally logo.
Because he was sponsored by them, yes.
It was, yeah, and that was the car. So yeah, really good. Also had a sort of French nu metal, rap metal soundtrack, which is worth listening to. You know, it's very of its time. So yeah, you know, again, I dare say if I played it today, it would make me want to cry because nostalgia is not what it used to be. But
yeah,
it's redolent of Christmas circa 1999 and V-Rally 2. I mean, you know, I never played the first one.
okay. So I did the first one you mentioned there about loose handling. I seem to remember if you know, it went anywhere near the edge of the circuit, it was either stop your car or flip your car. Basically, I found it very, very. The game wasn't a simulator, but it was very difficult. It's kind of weird. They definitely refined that for the second one. But I just noticed. Do you remember? This is quite video game nerdery, but video games used to be released, and then because you couldn't download them, they would release a platinum edition like a year later if it sold one for half the price, about £20 as opposed to about 30, 40. And for V Rally, I've never known, didn't realize they did it. They'd updated the game. These days, you'd have a patch. But the Platinum version, the first V Rally, has an extra Platinum exclusive feature of the Toyota Corolla. Ooh. So they added an extra car at like a year later. So I suppose if you really wanted to have all the cars, you'd have to rebuy the game, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It also had a Renault 8 Gordini in it, which I don't think
wow.
I've ever seen in any other rally game.
I've also noticed that the Almira is also in this game. So rare in the real world, but quite popular in video games, apparently, based on our discussion this evening. And the second one, 4-player split screen with a multi-tap. Remember that way to plug in a separate device.
Yeah, the multi-tap. Yeah.
Do you remember on a tube telly with you and your four mates in total looking at like 2 inches square of? Oh God,
yeah.
The 90s weren't all that great all the time, were they?
No. Tube telly VCR combos, you know, small enough to fit in your bedroom, split 4 ways.
Punching your mate in the ribs to give yourself an advantage.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, another thing. Yeah, we've left behind the 90s. You know, secondhand smoke and tiny tube TVs.
I would just want to give a brief mention to V Rally 3, which is not as fondly remembered. It was on the PlayStation 2, and it was by then the Colin McRae Rally series had left it for dust. You know, it really was. The Skoda Octavia, sorry, of rally games. It was at the back of the pack.
Jesus,
sorry, but it had
Cut him off, Killian.
sorry. I seem to remember playing it a lot in the Hyundai accent in that game.
Good choice.
Yeah, good choice. But the really amazing thing about that was the Game Boy Advance version, which looks terrible. But if you in the context of Game Boy Advance games, it's probably the best looking Game Boy Advance game that ever was, which is a small, tiny, portable Nintendo system. And it had, going back to our early conversation with the Network Q games, for the interior, it literally was just a picture of the interior, and the steering wheel moved. Exactly the same technology. But that had like the full Super 1600 gamut of cars. So the lesser spotted Polo with the 4 headlights, the round ones, was it Costi Catergamati?
XM2?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yes, but, yeah, and then the Saxo and the Opel Corsa that Meek drove. He's not in the game, but with that design, they were all in the Game Boy Advance version of Free Rally 3, which was quite appealing to me on a French school trip.
So, like, it's when you go to France on the school, you have to get French bangers, and a hooky copy of French V Rally 2. Okay.
Yep. That's it.
But on the subject of V Rally, it's interesting that obviously we're moving upwards in or closer to the times now. That how many kind of these track sharing, circuit based racer rally in inverted commas games there were. But it shows maybe the way that the audience went, and as technology advanced, the people wanted a more serious replication of the rally experience rather than a racing game that had rally cars in it or featuring in it. Because, you know, as we know, the V Rally, it didn't have much rally in it, really. You know, it's one of these ones that probably shares as much with rally modes in Gran Turismo that it does with anything else.
Yep.
Whereas now we're into more dedicated, focused. And as sim racing has gotten more popular, people are craving a rather different experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, simulation or sim racing is now a term. It probably wasn't really back then. And people were clearly experimenting with what the audience would purchase ultimately. But as technology improves, you can there's more bandwidth. A device, a PC, a PlayStation, Xbox has an amount of power, and physics take up a huge amount of that. If you have a really complicated tire model, then you have to lessen the graphics. It's always a balance, generally speaking. And in the modern day, clearly we're in a place where you can have realistic physics and some semi-realistic visuals, or rain and day-night cycles and stuff. But back in V-Rally days, that was not the case.
Speaking of sims, I suspect we're going to segue onto the mother of all rally sims, eh?
Yeah.
I suppose that then does bring us neatly to the fabled and revered Richard Burns Rally again, and 2 in a row for me. Never played it. Well, I definitely did play V Rally, but I have no experience of Richard Burns Rally. I never owned it. I currently don't have a PC. My laptop is certainly or a PC capable simulation rig. I think if I hooked up my Logitech sim rig to my MacBook, it would probably catch fire. So haven't played its current modded iterations. But Richard Burns Rally, why is it? Why are people still playing it? And I suppose how did it start?
Well, it's hard as nuts, really. And there's probably a better analogy out there to think about that. And I had time before this podcast as well. Hard as nails. But it's just, it was probably the first rally game that put vehicle dynamics over and above everything else. Nothing else mattered. And for me, I was playing it on a PlayStation 2. It's really weird how it released on that, because these days people play it on a PC only with a steering wheel, and they've got the full setup, sequential shifters and all this. But you try playing this with an analog or a D-pad, and it's. I think it took me, from memory, about a year to complete a stage. So I remember purchasing it, reading a review in a PlayStation magazine that's quite favorable, finding it too difficult, selling it, and then rebuying it with paper round money years later, and going, "Oh, okay, I can finally finish the opening stage. I've done it." Because if you so much as brush a ditch, it would damage the radiator and the engine. And I suppose, really, if you do hit a tree at 40 miles an hour, that is rally over. So that's what it simulates, and that's what it replicates. For a game, that's quite off-putting for most people. But really, unfortunately, the company who made it was bought by Gizmondo, which was this weird, before smartphones, it was like a Game Boy rival, but it was also trying to look like a phone, and it was a complete failure, unmitigated disaster. And so the company was folded. So there is a version of this on a portable device, a Gizmondo, that no one ever has, no one remembers.
Must be stupefiedly tricky.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, it meant there's never a sequel. There was never any proper support for the game. It never went on. But on the plus side, it means it's abandonware, and people, especially talented Hungarian modders, I think the main one is, rallysimfans.hu. They have, and the fans have come together with the community, and they've just continued developing this game ever since. And you can still play it on PC, and they've added in all these new stages, some great ones in Czech Republic, for example, very Barham.
Mm-hmm.
And the current sort of, well, now they're called Rally 2, but R5 cars, and some WRC spec things. Now, they're all based on the same physics, right? They're the same cars underneath, and the graphics are still poor. But the vehicle handling is so revered and fated that there are many people who look at this now and go, well, that's the only sim in the world. Forget your dirt rallies and your Colin McRae games and whatever else, or the WRC games. This is the only one that matters. I have a slightly different opinion. I think it's realistic, but there are more than just the physics to make a great game overall. But that's why the community is taken to it so much. Because the company doesn't exist anymore, no one can legally challenge their slightly questionable, unlicensed content, and the handling still is still visceral and still difficult, still a challenge.
So for myself, who has never played it, but someone who spent a lot of time in Dirt Rally and the original Dirt Rally and the later Dirt Rally, and I play predominantly, what I do play is Gran Turismo 7 and Formula 1 and all these things. Does it really stand up to these modern titles in terms of its handling model?
Yeah, as a whole, it doesn't, I don't think, and I'm going to upset people there. But in terms of its physics, it clearly can't be as technologically advanced, but the way it's done from way back in 2004, it does stand up in terms of a driving experience. But you have to go through many hoops nowadays to play around with files on that PC. I mean, who wants to do that, really? there's a hardy bunch of a few thousand people that do it, and I don't want to diminish their passion and hobby. It is fantastic. And what's really quite good at the minute is that there are organized events like Dirt Rally or Dirt Rally 2 clubs, if you've ever played those. So there's an organized event and everyone rallies in it. And if you retire, that's you out of the event. That's it. And so it keeps you on a knife edge, keeps you sweating because you can see at the end of the stage your results. And it only takes the merest hint of a tap of a rock and your car is not going in a straight line or not braking properly. So, yeah, it's definitely for the hardcore.
I had it on Xbox One, and I couldn't with a controller. I couldn't get on with it. You know, it was nails. I didn't have the patience and the wherewithal for it. I'd like to give it a go now. I love the fact that it's got such a sort of cult place in rally. You know, whenever someone mentions, I mean, it almost suffers from being that it's the stick that any WRC or any rally game that professes to be a simulator is clobbered by, you know.
Yeah. But it's had 20 years of community development by now.
Yeah.
Whereas your modern titles don't have that luxury. But I know they might have bigger budgets, but there's different constraints. They have to fit within licensing regulations. They have to make something that they think will sell. This doesn't have to do any of that. It's just what fans want to make. There it is. And
you can get a BMW M1 and a Whistling Pig Felica, which, you know, no other reason that's a winner, isn't
it? but really, I would say if anyone's interested in trying it, you really have to have a full steering wheel setup and a cockpit and a powerful PC, and that's quite cost prohibitive and space prohibitive. But it's just worth it.
I'd like to try it. I must find someone within driving distance that I know who can let me have a go, because I've just heard so much about it and I've watched so much on YouTube about it, and I do know people who do play it, and I'd like to compare it and see if it lives up to the hype, as it were. But it's amazing that a game can attain such longevity, particularly a game like that 20 years later.
I think it's amazing that such a community and fan base still exists with you there completely. I just think it's also a shame that the company was never around to continue that amazing work themselves in an official capacity, because this could have been a franchise to take on the Dirts and the Colin McRae's and the official WRC games. You know, if Dirt Rally physics with modern licensed cars and better damage model and better visuals, you know, that's I think what everybody on the internet wants from the new WRC game. But, you know, whether or not that's going to be the case remains to be the seen. I think they have to have, yes, it's realistic to a point, but we ultimately have to be aware that this has cost X amount and we need to make this amount and appeal to this number of people.
And the accessibility has to be there, although, and again, we probably won't jump too far ahead, but I believe there's 2 handling models in the new game. But they obviously have to tick many boxes, whereas these guys can focus on but 1 or 2.
But if you have the time and the money and you're really into rally sims, it's sort of a rite of passage that you have to try it. So, Killian, get on it.
Okay, well, once I have somewhere to put all of this as well, my folding play seat is very useful at the moment. You definitely need to have a dedicated room and space for all this proper, you know, to become one of the PC master race.
It's a big commitment, which means sometimes if you've made that big commitment, you're going to spend a lot of your time on Reddit and forums defending that commitment without being...
That was diplomatic.
Too controversial there.
I'm going to see a friend, David Lamb, who I believe has this game on a full rig setup tomorrow. So I will report back from when I knocked all the corners off a Whistling Pig Felica and they had a sushi in.
You'll lock up within the first heavy braking zone and be straight into that ditch, and it'd be rallying
like real life.
I seem to recall. Final point: you could, if you were stuck in a ditch and you weren't heavily damaged, you could press a button to have the crowd push you back on, which I thought was quite cool.
Amazing. But much better than you just resetting to circuit and getting a time penalty, an animation of some
a ruddy
sweaty fans
pushing you back on. That's it.
I don't think it's quite as advanced as that, but it sort of does it fade to black and then the people are there and they walk away. Yes, I think so. But now we're verging on. I could be wrong there.
There's just comments coming in as we speak. So we might leave Richard Burns Rally there then, and I think we need to start on another series which has been spawned many titles and has recently departed, I guess. But the official WRC series, I think, would be a good place because this now would have come out around the same time. So yeah,
2001, right?
Yeah, so the first official ever WRC licensed rally game. We've talked about these other games that have had the cars in, but they haven't all had not just the WRC branding, but the full roster or all the drivers' names necessarily, or all the rally names all matching in the same game until the first one in 2001, and then there was many sequels after that.
Yeah, because
Richard Burns was in that time as well.
And the original Colin McRae rally, it had 8 real locations, but none of them are real stages.
Correct.
They're countries, but not the stages. So this is where the license game comes in, I guess.
Yep.
So is it 2001 you said that came out?
2001, yeah. Highlight of my PlayStation 2 ownership experience.
I wonder why that is. It's 2001. What happened in 2001? Did someone get a podium on the Safari?
I believe so. The greatest ever 2-liter World Rally car did rather well. No prizes for guessing which car I played with perennially.
And again, another game that I have no experience with due to my lack of PlayStation 2 as a lad.
Killian is the only man in the world who was never.
People don't believe it. Yeah, they think that can't be right because everyone had one, right? So no, I'm afraid not. So I didn't have any experience of the WRC games until much later, short of playing demos in game shops. Remember when they had a PlayStation 2 in a cabinet and they'd put the latest title on it? So I did that, but that was about it.
Do they not still do that? You know?
Well, all the game shops have closed down. So, yeah.
I mean, I remember El Condor was a particular, as in real life, was a great stage. You know, in my Octavia WRC. I don't know. I struggle to differentiate the first and the second one all these years later. They kind of meld into the two. Although I think the second one had far better physics in terms of, you know, floaty cars not feeling fully connected to a stage, certainly on tarmac, because Monty could always feel a bit, you know, ice skatey, roller skatey, if I remember rightly. But it certainly got better.
Yeah, I was an ardent Colin McRae rally fan at this era. And I didn't discover the official WRC games. I was well aware of them, but I didn't actually play them until I played a demo of the second one while I was in hospital for some toenail operation. Anyway, we don't need to know that. But I was like, oh, and I vividly remember actually playing the Octavia in that scenario and going, I need to have this in my life. So obviously I played through the first ones. This was around the David Richards era, wasn't it? Of when he had the rights, and it was the correct decision to make an official game. So whoever was responsible for that, I'm sure it wasn't just Mr. Richards, but that was a big decision, and it really tried to replicate the stages more than any other game. I think El Condor was a great example there, but it had Sweden or New Zealand, and they were all very distinctive to each other and much closer to actuality. I'm not saying they're realistic, but much closer than any other game had got, in my opinion, just purely in terms of stage design. The handling, you're right, of the cars left a lot to be desired of sometimes. But the second one resonated with me a bit more because I think I'm right in thinking it had Chemical Brothers as a menu music. Star Guitar, was it? Great song. And the second one also had the drivers and co-drivers' faces and likenesses represented in the game. The first one didn't. I don't think. So
yeah,
it was quite cool to see Thomas Radstrom. You know, it's kind of stretched weirdly with his glasses there. But
yes,
in the
elongated Harry Potter. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they got the Panizzi brothers down though.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. But obviously, Colin McRae was not in these games because of licensing clashes. So, yes, it was the official WRC game. It had everybody apart from the McRae. I'm not sure if Alistair was in them either, but certainly
Alistair was. Yeah, it was Ford Driver 1 was Colin, wasn't he? Or Ford Driver something.
Something. Definitely Science was there and McRae wasn't by name. So, so the second one resonates with me the most out of those, but there was 5 in total. And what's interesting was they were a Sony PlayStation exclusive. So Sony had the exclusive rights to both WRC and Formula One during this era. But the shame also was only the first of these 5 was ever released outside of Europe. So North America, I'm afraid you didn't get the 5th one, which is called Rally Evolved, which is also really good in my opinion. No, they're all decent. Yeah, they're all really good.
I remember the third one. The reason I like the third one was purely because of the car selection menus. I distinctly remember being able to toggle between Castrol and BP liveries on your Focus a lot. And then you could get this fantastic exploded car view when you pressed square on the PlayStation, and all the bodywork and the panels would move several meters outside and you'd be able to see the suspension. Just really neat, little things.
Yeah. I mean, it's those sort of things where, whoa, look at the graphics. And now it's a bit primitive. But you're right, that was amazing. And I liked the fifth one, Rally Evolved, because they had this thing where you would come across other rivals who had crashed or broken down in the stage. Now, when you've played it a bit, it's clearly a canned animation. It's not like live. It's like, oh, on this corner in this stage in Japan, there will be a crashed Mitsubishi. But there's Gilles Panizzi. But it's like, but that seeing that for the first time in a rally game, I mean, I'm sure some of the others we mentioned might have done it, but for me, it was still like oh, wow, look, there's Danny Sola with his bonnet. That's quite cool.
He's Sola.
That's two episodes in a row now, Daddy. So
I was going to say,
yeah.
Hey, by the way, in the Acropolis 2003, I don't remember him. I looked it up after you mentioned it and thought, oh yeah, he's on the intro list. But did he actually take part in the rally? I don't remember any. I tried to find an image of him taking part in it and couldn't find one. So weird how he was ever down to drive was it a work Citroen?
Yeah.
And then he didn't become a regular Citroen driver, did he? Because then he was in Fords and stuff. But yeah, weird.
You mentioned something that you wanted to bring up on the subject of WRC games. There's a rather unusual title bunged in there, one I wasn't familiar with at all, and that would be WRC Arcade, Thomas, I think, which has a slightly unusual story.
A very brief mention here, because I know we're going on for a while. Actually, I've just realised my copy cost 50 pence, apparently. I don't know if you could see that on the Zoom call, and it's an audio podcast. Brilliant. Moving on. So WRC Arcade was an attempt at broadening the appeal of the World Rally Championship again. So once we've all mentioned games here that are actually more rallycross, where you've got cars also on the track, and this is exactly what this was. And strangely, it was on the original PlayStation, but it came out after the mainline WRC official games came out on the PlayStation 2. So it was clearly and at a reduced price with an age rating of 3+. So it was clearly aimed at a younger, cheaper audience. Let's arcadeify things. But it had the 2002 WRC season in terms of cars and drivers, and the tracks were named after the real-world events, even though they weren't authentic. They were at least stylized and differentiated to each other to match New Zealand and Wales and Sweden. But it has the worst handling of a rally game I've ever had the displeasure of trying in my life. It's abysmal. Even when you're on asphalt, it feels like you're on ice. And I know sounds like an exaggeration, but it isn't. The cars just slide straight on at a corner. But
Are you sure that's not an accurate depiction of the Lancer WRC that's on?
Oh, that's probably yes. Poor Alistair McRae and Dale Coy. So yeah, it's appalling. Weirdly, the developer made a game either soon after or soon before called The World's Scariest Police Chases, which was based on an American TV show. I don't know if either of you remember that.
I do remember that one, yeah.
Helicopter, American voiceover like this, and they had the helicopter shots of a car chasing America. That drove better than this. So something went wrong along the way. But just a brief mention to the worst and often forgotten, for good reason, official WRC game, WRC Arcade on the first PlayStation.
It's a good thing that I didn't purchase that with my lack of PS2. I could have easily slid into WRC Arcade ownership, and that would have maybe really put me off.
Absolutely, yes.
Would have undone all the hard
people
work.
But yeah,
put them off.
Binning it along with copies of Colin McRae Rally 2. It's terrible. Yeah, okay. So we'll come back to the WRC titles again shortly, because there is obviously many.
Yeah. I
think we should maybe move on to the Dirt series, which has had many iterations, and ones that shared names aren't always quite similar. I suppose the first one, Colin McRae Dirt, the last one to have his name on it, I suppose it's sort of like in my opinion, almost kind of a semi-reboot of the franchise. First one I personally owned following Colin McRae 2. They don't have 3 and 4. I never had 3 and 4. The last one to bear his name. I had a really good experience with this, to be honest. As I said, I felt like it was a bit of a reboot. It came out on PS3 and Xbox 360. Had a really unusual car list because it didn't have licensed current cars. Not without its merits, the list itself. The top tier were sort of focusing on Super 2000s. Like there was a Punto Super 2000. You'd have the Colin McRae R4 as well. and then a couple of classic cars like the Impreza WRC. There was no up-to-date rally cars in it outside of like the S2000 class, and very, I think maybe 3 or 4 tops World Rally cars. It did also have a Saab 9.3 Rallycross car, and a pretty unusual,
spec.
and a really unusual set of locations as well. Again, there must have been some sort of licensing things going on here. Yes, I actually brought those. So there were Super 1600 cars there as well, which is great because we didn't really see much of those following that. They had this is where dirt started to go slightly outside of rallying. It had the hill climb big rigs and rally raid spec stuff and rally raid T4, like the big Kamas trucks and buggies, things like that. Locations were quite strange. You had a lot of circuits. And a favorite of mine, which I've been banging out a lot about so far, was it also had Pikes Peak, and you could pretty much drive any car in the game up Pikes Peak, which was great fun.
Yeah. To be slightly nerdy about video games, this was the first game to ever use what's called the Ego game engine, which is Codemasters technology they still use to this day for the Formula One games. It's quite aged now, but this was a debut of a technology that's been used in many, many games since. I seem to remember there was the Peugeot 307 WRC in there of the few top tier cars.
You're correct. Yeah.
And weirdly, even though it wasn't an official WRC game, it had Tony Gardemeister's Astra Racing livery, which he competed on the Monte Carlo.
Yes. You can also get a ST205 as well, I believe.
You could.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this was in the era when McRae himself wasn't in the WRC anymore, right? So he was doing the Dakar and things like this. So it had, I think it might have had, did it have his Nissan in?
Yes. The Hilux or whatever it was. Yeah.
And it would have been around the time he did like the X Games and things like that, which probably fed into the second Dirt bit more, although that didn't carry his name. But that's where we started to see stuff like Gymkhana, which I really enjoyed actually in Dirt 2. I really liked Dirt 2. I really enjoyed the Gymkhana modes. Good way of kind of pitting yourself against yourself and trying to beat your score in a way outside of the stages if you ever got a bit frustrated at the rallying sections themselves.
There's Travis Pastrana was in this one as well, I think.
We were the best because we were the fastest.
Yes. There was a definite voiceover, wasn't there, trying to create some sort of story and dialogue. And actually, I think most video game fans like this one the best, but I preferred the third one because it was more rally focused. But I digress.
Yeah, that was it. It went back a bit more rally focused again for the third one. Was there still Gymkhana in the third one?
There was still Gymkhana, yeah.
But it went away from
Fiesta,
but it went away from like the rally raid stuff and the truck racing segment a bit, but it was a bit more rally focused, and gave us a bit more of a different car selection once again, which I have in front of me ready to go. Of course, not quite ready to go now. The page isn't loading.
While you're looking at that, my main memory of this was it had really good finish stages. Which
Dirt 3?
Yeah, Dirt 3, which Dirt 1 and 2 didn't have Finland as a location, I don't think. And so I really enjoyed in the Focus, like Ken Block's, was it 2010 Focus, something like this, in that era. Apologies if the year's wrong. And just driving the finish stages. I think the Mini WRC was in there as well.
The Mini was in the third one, yeah. It had the 4, they call them the Pro class, which is a Focus, C4, the Fiesta. Obviously, the Focus would have been retired, although Ken Block used to drive it a bit later, the Mini Countryman. And then, rather unusually, you had, with the American spec cars, like a Fiesta Open class and the Vermont sports car built Imprezas as well were in the third one.
I don't think I ever played Dirt 3.
Yeah, it had a fantastic online mode, which even though if you could buy a used copy of Dirt 3, you can never play the online modes, right? Because the servers aren't online, called Cat and Mouse. And you split up into randomly assigned, if you've got a lobby of 8 friends, you split up into randomly assigned teams, and one driver will be in an old Mini and has to reach the end of a stage in one piece. 3 other players have to defend that Mini, and the other 4 players are trying to attack that Mini and stop it from finishing the stage. So it's not realistic in the slightest. And then the next round, roles would reverse, and you're trying to attack and defend and vice versa. and it was absolutely hilarious, and a shame that you cannot preserve ever the online mode of a game. You know, you look at movies and books, you can preserve them somehow, but once those servers are switched off,
Gone
that's
forever.
it. There's just some YouTube videos. Yeah.
And I suppose after Dirt 3, then we got something that was a real sea change once again for rally games. Certainly in the mainstream, although it may not have been the most accessible, and remains not necessarily most accessible, but a lot more accessible than the likes of your Richard Burns rally, was Dirt Rally came along. And so this is where we saw the differentiation now take place since, that there's the Dirt Rally name, and then you had the numbered Dirt games, which were the more arcadey versions from there. Dirt Rally, and Dirt Rally was sort of an experiment. Would I be correct in saying?
Yeah.
When it was originally released.
Yeah, my understanding, and I don't want to speak untoward, is that Codemasters as a company was in financial trouble at this point in time, and Dirt Rally was almost a skunk work project, which is why I love the origin story. And one day I'll get it on record from someone. And so it was released only as early access on PC, it's PC only, and early access is where a game publisher releases something, usually self-publishes it, and it's not finished. And they're relying on the community paying a reduced price to help fund the rest of the game development and also gather feedback. But thankfully for everyone involved, it was a runaway success. They got enough money to finish the game, and then they got enough money to put it onto consoles as well and make it in VR and put the stages in. So it became a de facto, well, it's probably the only modern era rally simulator that calls itself a simulator as opposed to a game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never actually thought that it really was distinguishing itself as such, although I always called it a sim, but it was just that it was really standing above and saying, no, I am a simulator rather than anything else at all. I struggle to actually decide on if I prefer the second one over this or not, but I think
that's a good point.
Jamie come in with his comments on it first.
Just that I absolutely loved it. I mean, it's kind of, for me, it was I'd gone away from video gaming full stop, let alone rally video gaming, doing other stuff. I'd been aware of this sort of groundswell and building ahead of steam of Dirt, online on it belatedly for Xbox One, completely fell head over and heels for it. First of all with a controller, and then with a wheel. And I still think if there's a lot going on in my head and I want to just zone out, playing one of the Welsh stages with a well set up, 2-liter focused WRC is one of the most, involving video game experiences and the most satisfying. I remember the first time I managed to do a clean stage in Wales, feeling the need to sort of wake up my then girlfriend to sort of get praise and plaudits. Not that she'd give a fuck, it's just like, look what I've done, love it. Really rewarding, just superb game.
Similar thing for me, although not to with my girlfriend, but that was probably the first time I ever put a gameplay video or something on the internet. I did a run in a Hyundai i20 WRC car in Finland. Mm-hmm. I thought, that's so good. Someone on YouTube will want to watch it. They didn't. But, there was that sense of satisfaction of, I've done a run here and I've nailed every corner. I'm going to put it on the internet.
Or even just a series of fast-flowing corners can be really good. I can't believe I've done that. Screwing yourself up to sort of take the bit that you can sort of do flat if you're really neat, but will be catastrophic if you get it fractionally wrong.
Yeah, it's one of the most satisfying video game experiences I've ever had and continue to have to this day. Because, and I remember when I initially got it, I came very close to deleting it because it was so difficult and it was so hard. And I guess at that time, I'd reached an age where I could now put the time and effort and kind of understand how these things should work a little bit better. But I came close to binning it entirely, and then it clicked. And then it was, you were going through the stage with this sort of horror, and you've one light missing in it. I think I remember, I think Jimmy Broadbent did a video saying it was like a horror game at some point. Who's a sim racer YouTuber. It's like a just sense of dread and jeopardy, and you're waiting for the tree to give you catastrophic radiator damage at any moment. But then, you'd come through those few corners and you were up on the splits, and then you got to the end and it was just going, yes, you could sit back. Your palms were sweaty if you're playing on the D-pad or on the gamepad. And it's fantastic. And then they released the VR mode as well. And then, I had the steering wheel and the PlayStation VR, and the sense of immersion was sensational. in a Metro 6R4 in VR with the sitting down steering wheel. And it got us through a bit of COVID, it locked down the house, and we'd sit down and have a bottle of wine and play Dirt Rally VR and go up Pikes Peak in Dirt Rally VR after a bottle of wine and see how good we could do or bad. And it was fantastic. Although the biggest flaw for me, and one that kind of became apparent to me later, was the cars did feel like they didn't have a lot of weight at times. If you hit a ditch, like Wales was, I think, the one that gave you the biggest evidence of this. The car would really take impacts really weirdly. Like, it was always fine if you stayed on the circuit, but if you clipped a ditch or rut, the car performed really strangely, or it was very unusual. And maybe something that's kind of annoying when I revisit it now, probably more because I only started co-driving after I initially played Dirt Rally, is that the pace notes are delivered in the format of corner, then severity, rather than severity corner. So
Wow.
left 4 rather than 4 left, for instance, which is something the Kiloton games always did as well. Although there's another problem with their pace notes, which we should maybe bring up later. But that now bugs me a little bit. But maybe that's just something that's came around later on. But fantastic game, and I think the co-driver, other than the way the format of the pace notes, the co-driver sounded absolutely fantastic and remains one of the best co-drivers in rally games. Because it was clearly recorded with someone driving the stage, as opposed to a pre-recorded set of numbers and words that were just inserted as you go.
Could be wrong here. I think the co-driver in the first rally it might be Paul Coleman, who was the game director. That's how Skunkworks it was. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And the second one, it's Phil Mills.
Yes.
And I really like how sometimes he'll stumble a pace note because they've just recorded that stage and they thought, we'll keep that in. And I believe they put him in like a motion rig or something like this to record those. And isn't it, if you put it into game into French, it's Stefan Prévost as well?
It is Stefan Prévost. In Dirt Rally 2 is Stefan Prévost, yeah. Which is kind of, I wish I had the level of French to put it in French mode and have Stefan Prévost berate me for some reason. But there's one really stands out in Dirt Rally 2.0, which we've ended up straight into, is in Germany. One of the stages in Germany, you're going uphill after a square left, and I can't remember the name of the stage, and he just stops, and it's another square left or a one left, and he just stops. And the first few times I played, just went straight on into a tree. There was a note missing from there, and there is a couple of wrong notes in it. I think Poland has a few as well. Actually, I'll have to try and remember. But which is good, and it seems more authentic. But again, he's in the motion rig, and I think the original. I remember watching a video with the original one, and I think they recorded 3 different versions of the pace notes per stage. So depending on the sort of pace you were going,
right, yeah,
the tone of voice would actually change from the co-driver as well, which always sounded really good. So fantastic series.
In the first one, he says something like cut be brave. He tells you to be brave on a sixth left-hander in Germany, I think. Just love it.
Yes, because that isn't in the second one. There isn't those, like, the notes are well called by Phil Mills, obviously, as you would expect, but there isn't those more other sort of things that you might push the driver on that little bit more, or a watch or something like that. But I didn't remember that actually. Now that you just said it, I know the corner actually, because again, it's in the second one. Which is really interesting. So we see if Jonathan Jackson can or Kirsty Riddick can deliver in the new game.
I was going to ask. I don't know who the women co-driver was. It's Kirsty Jackson.
Kirsty Riddick is the
Kirsty Riddick. Sorry, Jonathan Jackson.
And Jonathan Jackson. Yeah, Kirsty would have been co-driving with Johnny. Would be probably best known for co-driving Johnny Greer. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But so I suppose maybe we should leave Dirt Rally 2.0 there. Then I think we've gone through both of them now at one point. Although I don't know, unless you have any other parting points on the Dirt series, I'd have one on Dirt 4 maybe before we leave it. But
just before Dirt 4, I would just say that Dirt Rally 2.0 had I think the first one did as well, but the clubs feature, which people can create a community-based rally. And again, like we mentioned with Richard Burns before, if you have it set in a certain way and you do have an off and you retire, or you have a puncher, you can't restart. It's asynchronous multiplayer, and that was a really amazing thing during the lockdowns. And the new EA Sports WRC game will have that as well. So that's another amazing way of getting into rally on a more serious level, I thought.
Yeah, the element of competition. I did join a number of clubs, and I was doing a sort of a competitive-ish championship there lately. But then you get rather annoyed and pissed off when
Yes.
you have an absolute nightmare of rally, and I'm not even going to bother with the next one now. But it's so frustrating, and you could be only 2 stages from the end and rip a wheel off to realize that you actually didn't put the spare in at service.
Yes.
And again, a very very authentic sort of way. And you look and press the look behind button, and you see there's nothing in the back. You go, shit.
Yeah.
Um,
And you've got another stage before service.
yeah,
And you've got to run on the rim. Yeah. But that's cool. And I just want to say that there's a Jersey e-rally, which I take part in. Ben Brunel, a colleague of mine, organises that each year. And that was a really good one to take part in because the Jersey rally couldn't take place. And so they did it in Dirt 2.0. And there was Oliver Solberg did one, and Skoda Motorsport did them as well. And I hope they fire up, with the new title. But let's see.
well, they seem to be pushing hard with a lot of the people in WRC2 and in WRC for the new game, I guess, because again, it's officially licensed. So maybe we'll see some more community events driven by the promoter and the developers themselves. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that, because the WRC esports did have a bit of traction up until a number of years ago, but it kind of died off.
Yep.
So with that, I guess, do we want to touch on the later WRC games before we start to finish up and talk about the new game?
Well, we can briefly mention them, I suppose. There was a year where they were all very average, I felt, in my opinion, and they were developed by Milestone. Then there was Kiloton or KT Racing, and they were also very average. But I did like WRC 9, 10, and Generations to an extent. But I know you have an alternative opinion.
Well, I didn't mind 9 and 10 so much. They didn't touch, for a driving experience, the Dirt Rally games, but the wealth of stages, and obviously having the official cars, which Dirt Rally didn't, the stage design, they were really narrow as well, which is what rally stages tend to be. We made them a lot trickier, but because you weren't really enjoying yourself in the car, it wasn't worth putting in the time. I felt from my level I would just turn it off and go back to Dirt Rally. Also really didn't like how the kiloton pace notes were delivered, because it just sounded like someone pressing play on a soundboard, really stuttery and jumpy, and it was clearly just a pre-recorded list of words and numbers inserted into the stage after, rather than putting Phil Mills in a motion rig. And it really takes you out of it. I think that a lot of that, the immersion in Dirt Rally, comes from how good the pace notes are. But I never really took to the kiloton games, and I did get WRC Generations at a reasonably good price, even though it was only not long after launch. Didn't gel with it at all. Again, same thing. Stages, locations were great. The hybrid cars, but it was really clearly unfinished. Some really weird things, like you could be on throttle or off it, and nothing. It was 100% throttle or off, and nothing in between. So no sort of finesse there available through the pedal.
Well, I would say I really didn't enjoy driving the Rally 1 cars, which is sort of the signature dish. So that's kind of defeats the object. But I just really like the stages. Yeah, some of what they call epic stages are twice as long as what's in Dirt Rally, and I don't think Dirt Rally 2 even has enough stages, even if you get the version with the DLC. Yeah. And when that game first came out, actually, it's quite light on content, and then the
Very
DLC
light.
was remakes of the first one. And you think, that is a downside to that game. But in terms of driving and the car sounds in the WRC Generations 9 and 10, they're pretty abysmal.
Oh, miserable, yeah.
Yeah, they're really flat, and it takes out. But it's like for me, there's something about them. They've got a joie de vivre, perhaps, of on paper they're technically not that great, but I still really enjoyed playing them. Up after 9 onwards, but before then I even really didn't like them that much. So I know that technically they're not meant to be that good, or they're not objectively. They're not. There's something about them on a gravel stage with the steering wheel when they got in a rhythm. I enjoyed how the car suspension worked, and that pulled me through. But there's a lot you have to overlook to get to that stage.
Yeah, no, I think I had a good enough time with 10, but they were always available quite cheap on 9 on the PlayStation Store or whatever. So you never felt like you were really shortchanged, to be honest. But you did get that much more content, and the long stages, and they had the power stage and all that, as you say, because like the longest stage in Dirt Rally 2 was probably 14, 15K, I guess.
In that region.
Whereas I'm looking forward to, and maybe this should bring us neatly to talking about the new game properly. We keep touching on it and then moving away from it, is what we know about it. And we do know that there's going to be some long stages.
Yeah, the development team. So just quickly, this is a lengthy episode. I do apologize. So This is a deal with Codemasters, who we've talked about already, who make Dirt Rally and the Colin McRae games back in the day. They are now owned by the behemoth that is Electronic Arts, who we mentioned, like FIFA or EA Sports FC and Formula One. And this is their first WRC title. Now, Codemasters got a 5-year licensing deal that kicks in this year before they were owned by EA. It's kind of one of those things where you kind of think, oh, I hope EA continues with it, because is WRC popular enough to make a game for them? I think here's hoping. And this is actually the Southern-based studio making this game, which people move on in lives. And I'm not saying it's the same people, but it is the same studio that has a lineage all the way back to the first Colin McRae game. And most recently, Dirt Rally. And I believe it's mainly the Dirt Rally 2 team who are developing this using a basis of those physics, but improving them. I suppose they, in particular on asphalt, they seem to be focused on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in a whole new graphics engine. So we mentioned that the technology used for the first Colin McRae Dirt has been used in nearly every Codemasters game ever since. This is the first time they're using something different called Unreal technology. So there might be a learning curve for them. But the reason they have done that is so that they can have longer stages. And so in theory, where you get to see them, each rally, because it'll have the official WRC calendar for this year, is represented, but they have more stage miles and longer stages than they've ever had in a Dirt Rally game, because that was a technical limitation. And now here's hoping that we see, if we're saying the downside of Dirt Rally 2 was there's not enough stages, this is hopefully the reverse here, where there's a good amount of stages and it has the car sounds and the graphics and the physics that we prefer from the previous WRC games.
Yeah, so now hopefully it's not coming at the cost of the rest of it.
Correct. Yes, we'll have to see.
I mean, it is what the rally corner of the internet has been clamoring for a long time, isn't it? To
Absolutely.
give Codemasters the keys to the franchise, as it were, or Codemasters / EA. Yeah, yes. I mean, it comes out. Is it November the 3rd?
Yes, although because it's EA, if you pay more, you get it on the 31st of October.
There's always a catch with EA.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose that sums it up, I suppose, rather well briefly. It's called EA Sports WRC. Obviously the first one from Codemasters. What else do we know so far? We have 17 locations, including, so we have 13 rounds this year's calendar, although one of those is going to be added post-launch, which is the Central European Rally, because see, that was a rather late addition to the calendar.
For free as well.
Yes, for free, as well as some other locations that aren't on the WRC calendar, and maybe we can discuss. Some people have pointed out that possibly Indonesia is one of those from some sleuthing via a screen grab from the trailer, and I guess it would be on you. Given that it features so prominently in 1 and 2, Wales is surely in there. You would imagine fan favorite.
If we get Indonesia, do we get a Repsol Sierra Escort Cosworth as well to live out our 1996 fantasy? That's what you need.
With
really
Wind Heavens on the side.
That's it, yeah. Or maybe Rally China 1999.
Yes. And then they'll bring in Cyprus then as well. These other forgotten rounds from years gone by.
I mean, that would be cool, but I somehow don't think they're on the hit list. Mind you, if Indonesia's there, that's quite obscure, isn't it? So who knows?
I mean, of course, the real thing is, do we get an Octavia WRC?
We shall find out, because as of now, as of the time of recording, we don't know the full vehicle list, but we do know that the top class Rally 1 cars are in there, the majority of the Rally 2 field in there, and the Fiesta Rally 3 and 4 are included. But there's going to be 60 odd classic or legendary vehicles from the history of the sport. We know which categories that are there, but we don't know what they are yet, other than a few they've released, like the Mini WRC from 2011 and 2003 Spec Zara. And in the trailer, there's the Delta and the 95 Impreza, and a screenshot has the 98 Impreza. But we've all seen most of those, if not all of them, in Dirt Rally 2. And what we're hoping for is
new ones,
more cars, new to the game, but historic vehicles.
The video has an Andrews Heat for Hire liveried Brooks Mark II Escort, which is a good sign. I could feel my anorak and my bobble hat jiggling there.
Well, I suppose on the subject of that, as you said, we know these ones, so it'd be interesting to have a bit of fun guessing some of the others then, because what we do know that there is definitely going to be more than just recycled Dirt Rally content. Because if we look at, okay, well, the Group A cars, they're probably going to be the same, one would imagine, unless they put a Sunny in there or something like that, or
Do you
go.
reckon we get any
Ooh.
Toyotas? You know, I mean,
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, now that there is Toyotas in the game because of the WRC license, maybe they will
Yeah,
let them have a Celica, which would be lovely.
I'd like a Corolla.
I would like a Corolla also.
you and the whole of Ireland would like a Corolla, yes.
Yes, I would. We do love an E11 shaped Corolla, and it was my first car. So, yeah, I suppose if we work our way down through it and we can wrap up there, then we know there's going to be two cars from, I guess, some people call the WRC Plus era or the Aero cars, the 2017 to 2021 regulation cars. So there's going to be two of those only. I would be
Seems an
shocked.
odd number, that.
Yeah, I would be shocked if one of those wasn't a Toyota, but it would be
Yes.
interesting to see what the other ones are. There is a Citroen C3 in the game in the WRC2 format, so do they have a C3 WRC? Because presumably maybe that's then less work. And there's going to be so many Fords in it. Yeah.
Yeah. The Fiesta's cropped up in other games, even though they're not WRC licensed. There seems to be like a deal where you can work around with M Sport and get a cheap license. So it's in like Forza Horizon 5 or something, and the Crew Motorfest. So that maybe for licensing reasons, one of those could be the Fiesta.
Okay.
With like a, mind you, it's official WRC game, so they could.
Be good to have Hyundai.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think whatever
I'll take
those two cars we get, I think we're going to probably have fun with them because they should be insane on the sort of Dirt Rally 2.0 platform of driving and stages that we've been used to. Then we have 12 cars from 1997 to 2011. I suppose it's slightly unusual that they're all grouped together because, competing in the same class essentially in game, although, vastly different cars.
162,
yeah, like we know there's the Impreza 98 there. Do we then get the other? There was three Imprezas World Rally cars in Dirt Rally 2.0. So I hope that one of those is binned. That they binned the S14 and they gave us an S12B instead. But I'm not holding out too much hope on that. So that's probably the one where we all want to see this part. There's 12 of these cars. We know one of them, but this is the one we probably want to add most of our hopefuls to, right?
We want an Evo. I mean, I want an Evo 3. Obviously, that's actually too early there, but still, yeah, I want some kind of Lancer. 2005, perhaps.
2005 Lancer would be good, and obviously a Cordoba accent and Octavia straight in there.
I mean,
the 2005 Lancers, my favorite implementation of a rear wing, because it's incongruously placed in completely the wrong position, right?
It's the coolest rear wing after the post Escort Cosworth world.
It looks slapdash because it should be at the end of the boot lid, but I love how it isn't. And that'd be amazing to see one of those in the great shout there.
And the best part is if you look it up, it has then resulted in some amazingly engineered rear boot lid hinges because it can't, of course, open in the traditional sense. So the boot lid hinge, really into the nitty gritty now. The boot lid hinges are an amazing bit of design and worthy of praise in their own right. Going now, we have two Rally 2 cars. So there's WRC 2 class, and unusually on the official website, there's then a Rally 2 class with an asterisk next to it.
Now, I've got something here. I thought, well, maybe that might be the upcoming Yaris. Things that aren't competing in WRC 2 at the minute. And like the Proton. But then during the reveal recently, they said, we're going to reveal 5 new cars on the stream. John Armstrong aptly revealed them. And it was like, the Fiesta Rally 4 and the Zara and the Mini, which aren't on the list on the game's website yet, but we have an article for that. But he then revealed, and the Fiesta Rally 3 is one of these new cars. And I'm thinking, you've already announced that. It's in a junior WRC category. So I'm wondering if the game duplicates cars by if they're in its category of what we call it, and then there's the official WRC section of it that duplicates. So they've announced the Fiesta Rally 3 twice, once in the junior WRC class, and once again in the Rally 3 category. Awesome. I'm not sure. It could just be duplicates, because then there's an asterisk next to it, and it says Rally 2 car. What does it say now? I can't scroll down.
All WRC 2 cars. Yeah.
compete in the Rally 2 class.
Mm.
Weird. I'm hoping it's something like the Yaris and the Proton, but it could just be duplicates.
Yeah, I guess that remains to be seen. Then we have 4 Rally 4 cars, which I guess will be, what we're used to. Probably, I guess it's going to be the Corsa, the 208, Fiesta, and a Clio, I guess. That's really all there is, isn't there? Unless I'm forgetting something. The NR4 cars, which I don't know, never most appealing or exciting. Anyway, S2000 cars, that could be fun. Give us again a Punto. I used to love the Punto in the original Dirt, so I'd like a Punto, but I'm not too fussed. Maybe on what comes after. Fiesta S2000, I think, is a really nice looking car, and that's just probably the Fabia. If we're going to give probably those 3 with it.
Yeah, you've got a Fabia, really.
I'm hoping it's the MGZR.
Oh, really obscure.
Saw one a good one recently. I think Steve Rimmer of Dirtfish fame owns one, doesn't he? But it was raining, and I saw a couple of cars go off. One of them was that, and the other was an Octavius. Funnily enough, sorry.
Sorry, I probably did more damage to the Sussex coast.
True.
That then brings us down to the Super 1600. Now, that was a class I've been clamoring for in games for a long time because I basically bought Sebastian Loeb Rally Evo just to drive the Saxo, and then deleted it a week later. We've got 4 Super 1600 cars, so they could be really fun because I think they're really,
Corsa,
really
Saxo,
cool. Ignis.
Peugeot.
Yeah.
$3 and $5.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do both of them. Yeah.
Ignis would be cool.
You could have 3 of them, the 2 Ignises and Swift. So 3 Suzukis. That'll suit me. Thanks.
I think the most intriguing part of this is there's 6 kit cars.
Yes.
I think that's the most exciting because I think from there down, we're probably just going to look at recycled Dirt Rally stuff, other than the addition of the Engineer.
306, Zara, Octavia, obviously.
Well, they've already got the Mark IV Golf and the Ibiza and the Peugeot, I think.
Yep.
6.
Yes,
so that's 3 of your 6, probably.
You would think so. And I couldn't begrudge them using those again, although the Golf 4 obviously should be a Golf 3.
I'd love a Megane.
Yeah, Megane.
Yeah, Megane.
And Megane would be good. And obviously Zara Kit Care as well, definitely. I'd be clamoring for Zara Kit Care. The rest of them I'll be happy with, but I really want a Zara Kit Care.
The Zara is the pinnacle of that formula, in my opinion.
I'd take the Megane over all of them, but yeah, I know the Zara is the pinnacle, isn't it? Because I mean, it won.
Live out your Felipe Bugalski fever dreams.
Exactly.
It's a good day for Citroen, and it's a good day for Philippe Bugalski. Is that what he said, or something like
this? Yes, yeah. The real king of tarmac.
Yeah, and I suppose then after that, it just follows a similar format to the rest of the classes that were in Dirt Rally 2.0. So yeah, really, really excited for this. It looks really promising. Unreal Engine should be a big sea change if they get it right. But I guess, this was a game that was supposed to launch, nearly 6 months ago?
Allegedly.
Yeah, they never said that. That was the rumor. No.
A game is not delayed if it's not officially announced to be on that release date. So.
I guess so. And I'm happy to wait if things are good. But I suppose what's interesting about this, a lot of talk around it, was that a lot of this was Dirt Rally 3 that then got folded in after the license was acquired and then they had to restart it. That's what I read or heard. And I don't know what you can offer on that front, Thomas.
Again, all allegations. I think when you ask the question, it's sort of batted away. I think the truth is somewhere in between, isn't it? I think maybe I don't want to speak for them, but in my opinion, working on a whole new game engine takes more time than they expected, and so it was all hands on deck for the last 3-4 years to try and get this first one finished, and then hopefully, with a bit of luck, they can build upon it. I think it's interesting. I've noticed it's not called EA Sports WRC 23, which is the nomenclature that all their other games, or every other of their sports games, EA's has the year in it. So whether that's just it's because it's the first one, or there might not be a sequel and it's just built upon through downloadable content, or it might have to sell well enough before they commit to the rest of the license agreement. So, we'll have to see. I suspect, hopefully, we can interview some of the developers closer to release because we are in that PR push period for EA, the 2 months before launch. So I suspect we'll hear more very, very soon.
I need a next-gen console.
Yes, because it's not on the old ones.
Yeah. So I'm going to finally have to bite the bullet and invest in a PlayStation 5. But
if it's good enough, the game. But look, on paper, it's everything I have wanted. but that doesn't necessarily mean it will work out. So we'll see.
Well, look, we only have a few weeks to wait, and I think we've rambled on long enough now. We should probably bring this to a close. I hope it's been a very different episode for us. I rather enjoyed it, though, I must say. Thomas, thank you very, very much for your time. I'm sure we'll talk again at some point in the near future. We may well be discussing in a few weeks how our thoughts are on this new game.
It would be a pleasure to do so. And thank you very much for the invite.
I hope people have enjoyed this. It's been a bit of a departure from our usual content, but one that I certainly have enjoyed. And I don't know about you, Jamie.
Oh, it's been grand. I've had the Colin McRae Rally 2 theme tune playing mentally in my head all for the last 2.5 hours, and I'm off to go probably black through Wales or something before I go to bed.
Fantastic. And public service announcement before we wrap up: do not listen to the Colin McRae 2 Rally soundtrack while you are driving, because it will break the law. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Rally DNA. We'll be back in a few weeks' time with another episode, and until then, it's goodbye from me.
Bye from me too.